When it comes to having a successful album, a strong lead single can play a huge role. While there can definitely still be success without one, a good lead single is important for introducing the sound of an artist's new era and making a positive first impression. However, not every artist got this memo, and as a result, had eras that either didn't live up to their potential or crashed and burned entirely. Let's discuss some of these poor choices and how they affected the albums they were a part of. Down by Fifth Harmony. Following the departure of Camila Cabello in 2016, anticipation for Fifth Harmony's third record was huge. Well, among Fifth Harmony fans anyways. The Harmonizers were curious to see what direction their music would go in, and how they'd continue without Camila. Well, they got their answer with 2017's Down, and it was certainly a downer. Down isn't a bad song, but its similarities to their biggest hit, Work From Home, made it largely unmemorable. It repeats that song's minimal production and repetitive hook, but lacks the campy sex appeal that made it work. Lyrically, it's about as basic of a love song as you can get. Gucci Mane has an okay verse on it, but that's the only real standout part. It's one of the most mid tracks on the album, and definitely was a bad choice as the lead single. It came across as them trying to replicate the success of Work From Home without really doing anything to make it truly special on its own. It failed to make a huge splash, peaking at number 42 on the Hot 100. The sad thing is, the obvious hit from the album, He Like That, was the second single, but due to little fanfare and promotion, it didn't end up going anywhere, and was the group's final single together. Other album tracks, like Deliver, Don't Say You Love Me, and Angel, were promotional singles, but weren't pushed as official singles, which is another baffling decision, because all of these songs stand out way more than Down, especially Deliver. While the album sold fairly well, it failed to match the success of the previous two. Fifth Harmony was always kind of messy as a group, and their label, Psycho, never did the best job promoting them, so while it can't be definitively said if the album would have done better with a different lead single, it's hard to deny that Down was one of the worst choices they could have made. Not Myself Tonight by Christina Aguilera. We simply can't discuss terrible lead singles without mentioning the mother of them all. Released in April 2010, Not Myself Tonight was the introduction to the Bionic era, and what a wild intro it was. An electro dance pop song, the track sees Christina doing things she normally doesn't do, such as dancing, partying, and kissing all the boys and the girls. I'm sorry, did she say she normally doesn't do these things? The singer of Dirty and Candyman doesn't like to party and be sexual? Girl, you are yourself tonight, you ain't fooling us. The lyrics come across as someone who just discovered what going out was, and while I do think that was intentional, it just sounded confusing coming from Christina, who was known for being fun and unapologetically sexual. The song and its video drew comparison to Lady Gaga and Madonna, only adding more fuel to the backlash she was receiving at the time. Remember, this was the early days of the Little Monsters, and they could get away with saying a lot worse things on social media back then. Ignoring all the context of the song's release and reception, it still simply isn't the best representation of Bionic. It comes across as too try-hard, and feels like it thinks it's being more boundary-pushing than it actually is. A brash, defiant party track like this was old news by 2010, and it didn't offer anything new to the music scene. Bionic, despite its criticisms, is anything but generic or trend-chasing, so having this as the first impression was definitely a choice. The song actually didn't do terribly, peaking at number 23 on the Hot 100 and becoming a club hit, but the perception of Christina trying to copy other artists, along with its poor critical reception, led to the following singles being largely unsuccessful, Justice for Woohoo by the way, and to Bionic being considered a flop. I used to be very indifferent to this song. I didn't outright hate it, but there was a little resentment for how it ultimately derailed the whole Bionic era. However, as time has gone on, I've actually grown to like it a lot more. It is quintessentially Christina, with its in-your-face lyrics and vocals that'll leave you with tinnitus once it's over. It took years, but I actually really enjoyed the song now. However, it is still a legendarily poor lead single, and was the beginning of her decline in popularity in the 2010s. Focus by Ariana Grande. After the massive success of her second studio album, My Everything, Ariana Grande was ready to move on to her next project, titled Moonlight. Its lead single, Focus, was released in November 2015 to a collective
"What was that?"
from audiences. Focus is a funky, brass-heavy, retro throwback song with unexpected and somewhat comedic guest vocals on its chorus. Oh, sorry, I was reading the description for her last lead single, Problem. Okay, let me get the right one here. Oh, here it is. Focus is a funky, brass-heavy, retro throwback song with unexpected and somewhat comedic guest vocals on its chorus. Yeah, even at the time, it was clear they were using the same formula that made Problem a success, only this time they swapped out Big Sean for Jamie Foxx, and instead of whispering the chorus, he's screaming it. Very creative. The song was a hit commercially, but not critically, and it wasn't necessarily a strong start to the era. Why would anyone be interested in the new album if it was going to be a rehash of her previous work? What about this song differentiated itself from My Everything? Apparently not enough, as the song was left off of Moonlight, which eventually became Dangerous Woman. It was included as a bonus track in Japan, so there's something. I'm kind of cheating with this one, as it's not technically a lead single, since it didn't lead to anything, but I still think it's an interesting part of her discography, worth discussing, as she doesn't really have many standalone tracks like this, especially ones that were originally meant for an album. For what it's worth, I actually love Focus. I remember staying up all night to watch the video premiere, and I loved it. It's actually still one of my favorite videos by her. I love the visuals, the color scheme, and her platinum hair is a serve. I spent the next week or so listening to this song on repeat, and it's still one of my most played Ariana songs. So, relative failure aside, at least she got me to focus on her. Taylor Swift, Me. Taylor Swift may be a lyrical mastermind, but for a pretty long period in her career, she seemed to not want people to think that with her lead singles. We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together was a fun song that worked for what it was. Shake It Off was a good self-deprecating, radio-friendly song that you could play at an elementary school dance or a family gathering. And Look What You Made Me Do was certainly attention-grabbing, but most Swifties agree, all of these weren't even close to being among the best songs on their respective albums. They were a lot more juvenile than most of her tracks, and while that worked for them, there is a fine line to walk between being silly but fairly well-written and then just being silly. Me blows comfortably past that line. Even just the title was a lot to take in when it was revealed. It's in all caps, exclamation point. The girl was doing the most with a 2-letter word. Once the song and video arrived, reception was mixed. The general consensus seemed to be it was a perfectly competent pop song, but she had maybe pushed the whole fun, unserious lead single shtick too far this time. Frankly, it sounds like a song off one of those Trolls movies soundtracks. I haven't even seen those movies, that's just the vibe I get. What really did the song in was the bridge, where she and Brendan Urie, of Panic at the Disco, can't forget that part, scream, "Hey kids, spelling is fun." What in the Sesame Street was this? I love silly, over-the-top moments in music, but this was just plain kid stuff, and not even well-written kid stuff. This one line alone was met with so much backlash that an edited version of the song without the line was put on streaming services, leaving an awkward silence in its place. Me still was a huge hit, and Lover did quite well, but the song was not a favorite among her fans or critics. It seemed like she overly course-corrected after the darker sound of Reputation, and while plenty of artists have made total 180s from darker eras to lighter ones, this was a bit too much. So much so that Taylor's songwriting credibility was put into question during this era. It was obvious she was always a great songwriter, but she seemed to not be using her talent to its fullest. She would eventually win back acclaim for her songwriting on Folklore and Evermore, but the memory of Me has not been erased, and it's often regarded as her weakest lead single. American Life by Madonna. I know I said Not Myself Tonight was the mother of poor lead singles, but this one is as strong of a contender for that title. Madonna had been on a hot streak of commercial and critical success with her albums Bedtime Stories, Ray of Light, and Music. The first two represented Madonna at her most personal and vulnerable, while Music was a more let-loose dance-pop electronica album with less heavy themes overall. However, with the worsening political climate and international tensions felt after 2001, Madge had to do what she does best, give her opinion, and boy, did she give it. Released in March 2003, American Life was the lead single to the album of the same name, and it's probably her boldest and most experimental lead single. The song is a glitchy, folk-influenced track with a techno beat, where she discusses her feelings of unfulfillment in life despite all she's accomplished. As the title suggests, it's also a commentary on American values and the problems that come with them, such as trying to stay on top and be successful, even if it means compromising your morals to get there. I do see what she was going for here. Who better to comment on the price of fame in the United States than Madonna? However, in execution, she comes across as a bit ungrateful. Not to say celebrities don't deal with mental struggles, but reminding us you have a lawyer and a manager, an agent and a chef isn't necessarily gonna make us more sympathetic to your argument. The rap portion of the song has especially gone down in infamy as one of Madonna's cringiest moments, and tipped the song over the edge from bad to really bad for many listeners. Apparently they don't like soy lattes with double lattes. The song was a bit too experimental for US audiences, peaking at number 37 on the Hot 100, far below Madonna's previous lead singles. It didn't help that the video was nothing special, just Madonna singing in front of some green-screened flags. This is Madonna, the queen of music videos. How can she not have a shocking video for such a provocative song? Well, she did. The original video for American Life was classic inflammatory, button-pushing Madonna, featuring commentary on the glorification of war and American culture. This video is great. It's thought-provoking, uncomfortable, and doesn't hold back. However, it's for those very reasons the video wasn't officially released, since it was filmed before the Iraq War, and her team didn't want to risk another Dixie Chicks situation. This was especially uncharacteristic of Madonna, whose career thrived on controversy. Ultimately, this left nothing to talk about. The song was a flop, its video was boring, and that was it. At least if the original video had been released, there would have been more discourse about it. The album itself actually performed better than you'd think, debuting at number 1 and going platinum within a few months. While it's one of her worst-selling albums, it still did pretty impressive numbers. However, Madonna's reputation took a hit after this album and its title track. American Life was too abrasive to play on radio, but not shocking or well thought out enough to have any conversation around it. This could have been remedied had the original video been released at the time, but since that was cancelled, there was little to discuss. It did leak online in 2005, but it wasn't until April 2023 that it got an official release on her YouTube channel, and I highly recommend checking it out. American Life is possibly Madonna's most divisive song. Some say it's brilliant and self-knowing commentary on the death of the American dream, while others see it as an irritating, unpleasant track with a confusing message from an out-of-touch celebrity. I'm somewhere in between those two opinions. I like American Life, and don't think it's nearly as bad as some people might say, but I don't think the ideas she presents really come together in a satisfying way. I do love the rap though. The scene in the original video of her bursting onto the runway in a Mini Cooper while dancing along to it, with all this violence around her, is so on the nose, and I honestly think it gets the point of the song across better than the actual song. Time has been a little kinder to American Life, as it seems to have more defenders nowadays, but it can't be argued that it was a messy lead single, to say the least.